everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda and this is a vlog of my late autism and ADHD diagnosis. Oh my gosh, I'm laughing as soon as I said vlog because what an unmasking journey I have been on. First off, I want to really reiterate what the autistic mask is. The autistic mask, and I have a lot of videos on this, but you know, every time I do a video, I'm understanding a little bit more about what it is and how it actually impacts, especially late diagnosed autistic people. But the autistic mask is literally the brain trying to survive. So I said in many recent videos, different is dangerous. And the autistic brain is really good at pattern recognition, and it recognizes when an undiagnosed person, yourself, when as a child, I did something that had kids laugh at me, make me feel stupid, leave me in confusion, maybe had adults yell at me, whatever the different response was. So my brain would go, don't do that again. And that's what creates the mask over time. As an undiagnosed autistic person is growing up, some autistic people are aware that they are masking to some extent. They may not use that vocabulary word. They might say, well, you know, growing up, I always acted differently in front of certain people and I acted differently in other people. Or I had a persona I'd put on when I was out in public, and then when I was at home, I was a very different person. They'd use maybe different vocabulary words than the mask, but they kind of had an awareness that they were different in certain situations. But then there's some autistic people like myself that I was completely unaware that I was masking. My mask was so strong that it basically even hid my identity, my core identity, from myself. You see this in other disabilities such as dissociative identity disorder, DID. The brain in dissociative identity disorder protects the person so much that they don't even know they have DID a lot of times until they're in their 20s and 30s. The brain is really good at adapting to situations to protect itself, basically. So growing up, I was what is called a very, very high masking autistic kid. That's why I didn't get diagnosed, because I was so good at masking all of my autistic traits. I think this played a lot in my family role because my sister got a fairly early diagnosis of ADD, which is what it's called back then. Now ADD is rolled in and it's ADHD. And so she got an early diagnosis, and she was a child who couldn't mask as much. She had bigger meltdowns and struggles that were bigger. And part of my mask was okay, I don't want my mom's life to be difficult. My sister's already a difficult child, so it made me be the absolute perfect child. So I masked to make my mom's life easier, especially since my parents got divorced when I was fairly young, and a child just sort of this parent is very important because I have one now. My dad was kind of an absentee father. So it was in my brain's best interest to make sure everything that I did kept my mom happy. And my mom was a really, really good mom. She was a great mom. She was actually quite ahead of her time as far as mental health. She, advocated so much to get my sister that early diagnosis, because girls did not get diagnosed in the late 80s and 90s. I'm not sure exactly when my sister got diagnosed, but it was either late 80s or early 90s, probably early 90s. And she advocated to figure out, what was going on. And since then, my sister's autistic ADHD, but they definitely weren't giving out, the autism diagnoses. And I didn't, of course, get diagnosed until autistic ADHD until adulthood. But my mom could tell that my sister was really struggling with executive functioning and all the different markers of ADHD, and she was able to get my sister a diagnosis. But she didn't notice any traits of autism or ADHD in me because I presented in that completely 100% masked way that girls often do. I was the extremely, extremely good child. I went above and beyond. I always followed all the rules. I never asked questions. I stayed out of the way. I did what I was told to do the very first time. As some of y'all know, I have pathological demand avoidance profile of autism. My mask was so strong that it rode my PDA most of the time. Every once in a while, I would come across something that was too much for my brain and the PDA would flare up. But that was so rare that adults were like, oh, Amanda's always so good. It makes sense that every once in a while she would have a difficulty. And so they would just not really, address and figure out why this thing that seemingly shouldn't have been too hard all of a sudden was too much for me. So I'm saying all of this because since my last video, so it hasn't been that long, I have come to the realization that another part of myself that needed to be unmasked was my sexuality. Last year, I learned about demisexuality. This is the demisexual flag, although I think it's backwards. And I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense because I really have to be close to somebody before I would ever want to be intimate with them. And notice how I said someone, because in a huge flash of realization, I realized that I am bisexual and have always been bisexual. So, a lot of LGBTQ people, queer people, come out of the closet. Like deep down in their soul, they've always felt their queer identity, but due to whatever various reasons, sometimes just like internalized homophobia, sometimes just not having a language. Like I didn't know demisexual is kind of a new word. A lot of trans people never ever were around or saw role models of other trans people in their life. So they didn't have a word to put to their identity. And when they were exposed to the idea, it was like, oh yes, that's me. I relate to that. And then they were able to come out. But they still had that feeling like something was not quite the same as others. I basically unmasked my bisexuality, just like unmasking my autism. So for me, when I talk about unmasking my autism, because I said earlier, I wasn't aware that I was masking. It wasn't until I started doing research on autism and I heard the term masking, again, being exposed to language, heard the term masking. And I went in and got my diagnosis right after my kids got diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And I started to listen to other content creators who were unmasking their autism, and I would see these similarities in myself. And it was like peeling back layers, and I could see where I had been masking the autistic traits. And it was like quiet voices that I had pushed down. Basically, a lot of dissociation happens, which is why you have CPTSD happens very much in autistic, late diagnosed autistic people. Dissociation from these autistic traits get pushed so far down, but all of a sudden I had a crack in my mask. and I could start to see it. And then it's like it started just pouring forward. And then I've been able to unmask layers and layers and layers. And over the last 1 year and I think 8 months since my diagnosis, I've just been able to keep healing back, healing the trauma that being undiagnosed created, and that allows me to get to know myself more and more at different levels. I wish I had put my phone in airplane mode before I started filming, because I am getting like a barrage of text messages, but I'm trying to ignore them and focus on my content. But if I seem distracted, that's why. And my nose is also really itching. So this is going to be a good tangent, and I'll come back to what I was talking about. But I don't know, some of y'all might have seen my post yesterday on the community page where I was planning on doing this video yesterday, and ADHD just got a hold of me. I've still not been able to get on medication for my ADHD. And yesterday was one of those days where I was bouncing from thing to thing to thing, and I just completely forgot to film. And I also, I took a shower last night and forgot to wash my hair. And there's a video I have about how people with ADHD can't form habits. And I mean, yeah, I took a shower and forgot to wash my hair. ADHD, it was a high ADHD day. So my hair is like yuck. So that's why it's up in a bun today. And I'm going to take a shower again later. But also, I'm not getting rid of my bangs. I love my bangs, but I'm due for a trim. And I have a trim scheduled next week. But right now they're like down here past my eyes. And so I'm having to pull them up or push them to the side. Anyway, it's just been a day. Okay, so let's get back onto track. So, yes, it was interesting because, like I said, unmasking my bisexuality was like lightning struck. It's like everything made sense all at once, just in the very similar way as, you know, portions of unmasking my autism. And I very much feel like this is still part of unmasking my autism for a couple of reasons. One, again, my mask hid so much of my identity from myself. And second, there is a huge overlap between the autism and LGBT communities. And it was funny because, like, when I first got diagnosed and I saw how much overlap there is between autism and and queer, I was like, I must be one of those weird outliers, you know? Like, I guess not everybody, but there's a big, huge overlap. No, I'm not an outlier. I'm autistic and I'm queer. And, like, here's a couple of things, okay, that were radically unveiled to me. And I'm sharing this because I think a lot of late diagnosed autistic women are going to have this as part of their journey. So whether it's to find out they are transgender, lesbian, or bisexual, and I don't know, same, I have a lot of men people. Oh my God, seriously, the text messages are just like popping in. This is what also, there are more undiagnosed or late diagnosed autistic women and people of color, but there are also high masking men who also are late diagnosed, and they also might find out or become aware of their queerness later. And it's not saying that all autistic people are queer. That is not what I'm saying, but there is a high correlation that scientists don't quite understand yet. So here's a couple of things. One is I've always been attracted to women, but because of Western, well, not even necessarily just Western, but just like history's objectification of women in general, I thought that was just kind of normal. Like, I thought, well, everybody appreciates and thinks that the feminine form is beautiful. And that's true. But what I didn't realize is that that doesn't mean that because people will appreciate a feminine form as beautiful, that there's actually like an attraction to it, where you might think past just beauty and you are actually attracted to that femininity. Just the same way as I can be attracted to the masculine form. Like I very much am attracted to certain women and certain men, and I have been in my past, but I just excused it away by being like, well, yeah, women are gorgeous. Of course, everyone's attracted. I'm laughing now because when you hear your like thought process and you can see it for what it was, and now it's like, no, so ridiculous. So, and because I'm demisexual, so there's been times when I've been very, very attracted to a woman, but then if I would like to think, oh, would I have sex with them? My answer is always no. But it didn't dawn on me, that's the same thing for men. I can be, very, very attracted to like a male person, model, celebrity, something like that. And then in my head, if I was to think, oh, but if that person was right here in front of me, would I want to have sex with them? The answer is, again, always no, because I'm demisexual. Like, I can be attracted to somebody, but I'm not actually going to want to be intimate with them unless I have an emotional connection. So I think that's another thing that delayed me understanding about being attracted to women, because I didn't put it together, because being attracted to men is normalized for women. So that I didn't make those leaps of connection, right? And there have been times when I have been like in a close feminine platonic relationship, and we are having a very like close conversation, and I'm feeling very emotional in that moment in my past, where I have had the thought in my head, like, what would it be like to kiss my friend right now? I can't believe I'm saying this on the internet. And dissociation, my autistic mask, would not allow me to have that full thought. It would be like, no, and like literally push it down before I could ever really take time to ponder it. And it wasn't something that I'd think about on later. It would just be something like that was in a split second and then squashed and pushed down so far deep that I wasn't going to even ever admit it to myself. And y'all know I have a memory disorder, so the fact that this has kind of like come up to the present is pretty cool. So a couple other things to note. This is just cool, like, to know this about myself. Oh no, there was one more thing I was going to add. The other thing is, though, as an autistic person, I really don't like lying. Like, when I lie, it's an actual physical response. My stomach kind of feels queasy for a minute. Sometimes I stutter. Sometimes I have a hard time getting the words out past. Lying or telling untruths on purpose, not something that I can do very well, and I don't like it. And the funny thing is, so talking about like, oh, I'm straight doesn't really come up in conversation that often. At least I haven't had that experience. But anytime that I have had to say like, oh yeah, I'm straight, there's been this like part of me who's like wanted to look over my shoulder and like, oh, they're going to catch me. Like it had that same feeling like I was lying. But again, I didn't catch it because part of my autistic mask was never ever to talk about sex or sexuality, especially in a public forum like this. Because again, part of my mask was always be a good little girl. And good little girls don't talk about sex. That's not true, but that's what my autistic mask said, right? And so talking about whether you're straight kind of falls under that, like, because it kind of implies that you're thinking about sex, I guess, or sexual orientation. And again, my mask didn't want me to look into that very hard, did not want me to think about it. So it would like say it, but then like feel inside. But like the first time I said, I'm bisexual, like it felt right. It felt good. It felt like I wasn't telling a lie. I don't know how to explain it other than that. And the interesting thing, this is really all to do with just like uncovering my identity, uncovering who I am, unmasking. My mask like boxed me in. It made me feel very, very small. I had to make other people comfortable. I always had to be a good little girl, and I always had to be perfect, which is an extremely limiting way to live. So I could never have strong opinions. I could never talk about subjects that were volatile because like I had to be a people pleaser so much. And where am I going with this? Oh yeah. So unmasking has really just been like this journey of self-expression and learning who I am, and discovering that I'm bisexual really doesn't change much about my life because I am in a very happy monogamous marriage with my husband who is cis and straight. And that's not going to change. Like, we love each other so much. We've been getting more and more close as I've been unmasking. He's been a very, very supportive partner. He's, excited that I am learning more and more about myself. So apparently there's a lot of inner fighting in the queer community about how bisexuals shouldn't really like be allowed to call themselves bi if they are in a heteronormative marriage like I am. I'm like letting that discourse not affect me, because even though I'm not coming out of the closet, it's not something that I've secretly known about myself forever. As soon as it was unmasked from my site, it was like an instant knowing. It was just like, I feel secure in who I am, so I don't have to care about what other people think, which has also been a really good part about unmasking my autism, is like having that confidence that I never had growing up, because I was always who other people needed to be. I never got to discover who I am as an individual. It was interesting though, because actually for a couple of weeks that led up to this whole like opening of the realization about the bisexuality, it's like my brain was like opening the door to let me kind of like be willing to explore this, because all of a sudden I was really interested in reading queer books like romance novels and other queer fiction. And I started following Hannah Gadsby, a queer autistic comedian. I think I talked about her or them in a recent video. And just like kind of, I've always considered myself an ally, but I've been trying to immerse myself more in the queer community to be a better ally. And I think that was my brain's way of being like, okay, we're ready to acknowledge this part of your identity. And so then like having that realization that I'm bisexual has been an intense hyper focus over the last couple weeks. And I was telling my friend that it's a hyper focus, and she was like, and how is that manifesting for you? Like, wondering, are you like now trying to like, she just wanted to know. And I was like, well, mostly it is, again, immersing myself in the culture. I have been following lots of queer content creators online for a while, but now I've been adding more. And I picked up a book called Rainbow History Class, which is a history of queer culture. And I'm interested in reading more about our history and that's how it's kind of manifesting as a hyperfixation. Oh yeah, and then like buying everything Pride right now. Oh, I don't have my mug, but I bought a Pride mug, a bracelet, some earrings, and I haven't gone too overboard, but I am having fun picking and choosing a couple things. These came in the mail yesterday. They were like about these, for my blind viewers, they are giant heart pride flag earrings, and they are like 3 or 4 times bigger than I thought they were going to be, but I absolutely love them. They were white on the back, and so I had my son paint the demisexual flag on the back of one, and the bisexual flag on the back of the other. So anyway, I also really wanted to talk more about another aspect of my unmasking that has also kind of been tied into all this, but this video is already at 25 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I am genuinely excited to read everyone's comments on this video. I would love to hear your story if you were also, like, however you want to phrase it, coming out of the closet queer later in life, or like me, had like a sudden realization, and how that's kind of impacted your life. And like I recently posted on Threads, I'm in a baby gay euphoria right now. I'm really excited about this. It's not going to change my life, I don't think, but that's what I said about my autism diagnosis. When I first got diagnosed autistic, I'm like, oh, okay, that's going to be interesting, but it's not really going to change anything. And then it has changed everything. But I can't see this changing anything except maybe being able to meet more queer friends, but I could do that as an ally too. So I don't know. It's just a really, really cool part to like know this about myself and feel it and see it and revel in queer beauty and queerness, because I don't want to romanticize the queer community, but it's like, realizing my autism, I've always been a disability advocate, but I really didn't have a voice to speak about it until I got my diagnosis. Like, I always felt part of the disability community. I didn't know I was part of it. I've always been an ally. I didn't know I was actually part of the community. Like, the mask hides everything, and it's just really good, so good to like be knowing myself. Okay, really saying goodbye now.